What's up? Slap bass. What's up, guys? Back again. This is Garrett Greenest bringing you something cool that I can show you that I like quite a lot, which is bass. Bass, 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 bass. So I've played bass for about 19 years now, and I could say I'm pretty good at it. One aspect that a lot of people really focus on is the whole slap the bass, man. So as you've read by this title, we're gonna learn how to play slap bass today. Kind of like that. So in this case, when we're talking about slap terminology, we have 7 levels that we're going to go through today. So when we're talking about slap bass terminology, what you really want, what everything is centered around, is the pop sound. People refer to popping as using these fingers to pluck the strings, but I'm going to call those plucks, and you'll see why later. So a pop is just the string hitting the fret. It's just that sound whenever you're playing. So I can, or I can. That's the difference between regular fingerstyle bass and slap bass. Now, a couple of things. You may notice I'm not playing with an amp. Now, a great bassist by the name of Jaco Pastorius says that when you practice bass, you should practice without an amp, so that way that you're hearing everything you're playing without relying on any extra volume, so that everything stands out more when you mess up. You play with uneven dynamics, or if your tone is bad, or even if you can sense that your intonation is wrong, it can help with that. It especially helps when playing slap bass, because what you're looking for is the pop sound, that string hitting the fret sound. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The 7 different techniques that you have to learn in order to play slap bass. Now, before we really get into the different techniques and styles of playing and such, let's just go ahead and rule out all the bad habits that you may already have picked up in your journey of learning bass. First of all, don't play with your thumb facing down. This is bassists like Flea and Les Claypool, and there's nothing wrong with playing like that. It just limits your capabilities as far as like what techniques you can utilize whenever you want to pull them out and do something impressive. Like with Flea, he only plays with his thumb and his middle finger. So he just takes so much motion, it's so wasteful. Don't play with that back and forth seesaw type of style. That's so bad. Thing to know number 2, when you play slap bass, you are not literally slapping the strings with your fingers. There's a grace and there's a technique to it. All of it comes from your right hand. Your posture, the way that you hold your fingers when you have a slap bass posture, it all matters a lot when you're playing, especially when you're playing something fast. And number 3, dynamics. This is the hardest thing for any person learning how to play slap bass will have to conquer, because the difference between thumbing down on a string and plucking up on a string is a lot, especially when you're first kind of getting your bearings on what that feels like. So level number 1, this is where everybody starts. This is what slap bass is. This is the first note you're gonna play 90% of the time when you start a line that is slap bass, and that is the thump. The thump. You use your thumb to thump. That is the terminology we're using. Now, as I said earlier, you don't want to play with your thumb facing downwards, because that's gonna limit your style a lot, make it really sloppy, and you don't want to come straight down on the string ever really when you're slapping. What you really want to do is more of a graze and come down at an angle. You don't want to go right on top of it, and you don't want to go across. You want to come down at an angle just to clip it with this part of your thumb right here in the end. You might be able to even see a callus I have there. You want to come down the string and practice that motion with all the strings. And of course, with everything that we do today, always practice playing it musically. If you're just slapping notes out there, then you're not really gonna get the musicality involved with it. And I mean, you'll just sound like Nigel Clutterbuck and just be playing just a bunch of ghost notes constantly. A minor pentatonic. So thumping, very easy, very self-explanatory. Come down at a slight angle on the string. Just enough to get a nice bounce on the string. That's all you need. You don't need that because it's all about efficiency, which I'll explain later also. Level number 2, plucking. That's these fingers right here. Plucking, not popping. Popping, people also use that term, but I would say popping more describes the sound you're sonically making whenever the string is hitting the frets and making that sound. Like Flea does, he just uses his middle finger. So all he does is come straight down perpendicularly on the string. I'm like flipping off my bass right now. He just comes straight up and just pops like that. So his style, he's going down and that also ruins your dynamic unless you're playing super hard with your thumb, which is so unnecessary because you want to stay kind of low and tight to the strings. You don't want to be moving all over the body. Now, if you've been playing for 19 years like me, you know that you kind of get in the groove of things and you can just kind of feel it. It's kind of a rhythm you get in, and it's not hard to break that down or break out of that. But what I suggest is when you start plucking, use your first finger. First and foremost, you need this. You need this when you play. Now when you pluck, contrary to popular belief, you don't need a hook finger. Don't hook it under the string and pull it way up from the neck, because that makes your dynamic way off, because your thumb is never going to be as loud as your plucks, because typically your plucks are used for the lighter gauge strings just because that's where it's positioned and it makes the efficiency a lot easier. So what you really want to do when you're plucking is you want to have the string at this angle to your finger. Not straight on like this, but at this angle. So that way when you're thumping, what you're seeing underneath is you're kind of just using your finger like that. It's more just a little slight pull. It's not a yank. You're not trying to yank some old shoestrings out of your yard mowing shoes. So when you're playing, you only want enough tension on your finger to be able to just snap the string like that. So your finger will bend back slightly when you pull off of the string like this. You don't want to hook it because that's going to cause your hand to fling out from the bass every single time you do it. It's really hard to have so much control that your hand stays right there every time you pluck if you're using like a hook finger. So you need to have it kind of loose and just kind of let this joint do the work. See that? Level number 3. Now level number 3 is something that is going to come naturally to you, especially if you've already been playing bass, because it's something that you already do when you play. When it comes to efficiency and exactly what note you're hitting and exactly which note you're intending to pop and intending to be a ghost note, this also has a lot of effect. This is hammer-ons and pull-offs. So when you're playing a line, the number one thing that you're going to want to do is keep a steady dynamic between your thumping and your plucking. But in between, you have hammer-ons and pull-offs, which will have a different dynamic because there's no way you can hammer on with the same force that you use to swing your thumb or pluck with your finger. But you integrate hammer-ons and pull-offs into your playing pretty organically, pretty naturally. Now this use of hammer-ons can be used really technically and really quickly, and it gets even crazier later when you start using other techniques that I'll show you later. But this is a masterclass shown by Victor Wooten himself, who has mastered the bass plenty of times over, where he plays in classical thump. He goes through the different levels of thumping, where he starts with just single notes, and then he starts using hammer-ons for every note. And that's how you can use that. Level number 4. Now this is where it starts to get kind of hard, because this deals more with feel. You have to really feel what this is while you're playing it in order to really gain a full appreciation of how you can utilize this to create a slap line. Ghost notes. Ghost notes are just pops that don't have a musical use. It's purely just percussion. It adds flavor and kind of a backbeat. It's almost playing drums while you're playing slap bass. It's the notes you don't play. So when I play something like that's cool and all. Hammer-ons, pull-offs, thumping, plucking. But ghost notes can spice that up really quick. And again, it's something that is going to take time to feel, because if you don't have a natural aptitude for rhythm with your right hand in particular, you're going to have to really feel where those ghost notes need to go. Because you can read tablature and they come out as little X's, and you can specifically find out how to do the note that you don't play. But I promise you, once you start forming slap lines and utilizing this all the time, it will flow very easily. Utilization of ghost notes, very, very natural, as with hammer-ons and pull-offs. And that brings us to level 5. Level 5 is chords. Yes, you can play chords on bass. Now, a lot of the time when you play chords on bass, the easiest way to do is a strum. You use the percussive sound of your fingernails hitting the string in kind of a one slotted motion, and you get a slap that's a chord. And you can Now there's also another way to play chords. Whenever you have either an octave spread or maybe like a minor third and a root 2 octaves below it, then you can also do this little claw thing right here, which is really easy to implement. You can offset them, or you can also just do them the same time. But what you really just want is a nice even pop with both fingers. You just want to use that claw and just pluck whatever intervals you have there. It's usually going to be between the lower strings and the higher strings. It's not going to be a double stop where you're either slinging with your fingers or plucking with both fingers, which there's also more to that too. Which is all different chord shapes you can play, but the matter is you want them to pop. You want all those notes to pop. You want them to pop at the same time if you're intending to, and you want them to pop even. So you want to make sure you have a nice even pressure and be able to utilize that freely while you're playing whenever you need it, because this is just a toolbox I'm giving you here. And now we get on to the interesting stuff. Bassists like Stanley Clarke and Marcus Miller have invented something called double thumping. When I first saw this used in person, I was watching a Victor Wooten concert in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I did not know how he was making so many sounds with so little motion. And then I realized he's using his thumb both ways. The way to utilize this, which is incredibly hard to get used to, because the feeling of pulling up on a string with your thumb is not natural by any means. So this is why you don't go down on the string, because how do you pull up? You can't. How do you do that? So you want your thumb posture to be more parallel to the string, so that way you can just go down and then come up. This essentially turns your thumb into a pick. So it turns slap bass into hybrid picking, essentially, because if you were really independent with it and really had an insane sense of dexterity, you could really just hybrid pick and slap every note, thumping and plucking the entire time. I can't do that, but I'm sure Tosa Nobasi can. So what does double thumping look like in a line? Well, instead of hammering on the first note, you can... It's that easy. This is the same technique that Victor Wooten uses in classical thump in the third phrase of the opening of that song. He single note, and then he goes hammer-ons. And then you guessed it, double thumping, the whole thing. You can use this all the time. And it's also very useful because now you have 3 notes that you can play anytime you want to. So you don't have to stick to one string. You can. And you have 3 notes. You can use that on one string. And this is where your hand posture comes into play. If you're slapping like this with a hook and your thumb is down, there's no way to do this. It's impossible. You need your finger to flip on the string up like that, not pull it, anchor it. So practice on every string, play it musically, and really So now you got 3 notes that you can play at any time, which if you add hammer-ons, that's 4 pops that you get. Which brings us to level 7, double plucking. Now this technique took me so long to get used to. I really had to retrain my brain on how I felt when you feel the strings under your hand, what it feels like, because it is so unnatural. So we've got our thump, we've got our hammer-on, we've got our double thump, we've got our pluck, double pluck. That's where you add the middle finger. Now, you may notice when you look at your hand, your middle finger is significantly longer than your pointer finger. And especially when your fingers are in this posture, the tip of your middle finger may come down way further. So this is why your hand posture is super duper important, because if you want, like plucking, double plucking requires the same exact pressure as your forefinger. So when you're double plucking, you want to make sure that you are spacing it evenly. So if you want 4 even notes, so when you're double plucking, you want to make sure that you're getting a nice even pressure. But let me tell you, when you start trying to implement this, it's going to feel so unnatural, because when you play slap bass, you want to get a lot of that off of that fulcrum. Your knuckles a lot of the time, or your fingertips will rest on the body of your bass while you're playing, so that you can really, even especially when you're doing triplets. But the better you can get at this, the better you'll learn how to play slap bass with your hand just kind of floating above the strings, and then you can just have more control over what you're doing. The only thing that should ever rest on your pick guard is these knuckles right here, because that is going to give you enough basis to be able to do anything on the body down here as far as. So when you're playing with a double pluck, this is the reason why you want your hand posture to kind of be like this. Not like this, not like this, nothing weird, not big and open like this, but kind of tucked under. This is actually a lot of the time used with classical guitar, where your hand posture is more above the strings and you're kind of just plucking from above the strings. And it gives you a lot more access and a lot more options for what you're gonna do. One of the bass lines I was playing earlier, something like, I mean, using some ghost notes in there, some pull-offs, hammer-ons, whatever. But when you can double thump, it's immediately more musical. You immediately have millions more options of like what you're capable of playing, because this back and forth motion with your wrist, like forever, that will tire your wrist out. You'll get carpal tunnel in your first 6 months playing bass. That's not true, but maybe you'll just get really buff right arm, forearm muscles. But when you can double pluck and double thump, that's something else. Then you have everything open. You can play whatever you want. And it's a lot of the time slap bassists will use a 4-string bass because it just lessens the noise and you're less likely to miss a string because the string spacing is typically wider on 4 strings. It's not true all the time, especially with like a Vox or a Rickenbacker or something. But you get a nice fat Fodera or like Ibanez BTB series, anything where the bridge is separated by the saddles, and you have a nice fat room to just dig in those strings, and it feels super nice to play, especially when you're double thumping and double plucking. So utilizing all these techniques, we have thumping, we have plucking, we have hammer-ons, we have pull-offs, we have ghost notes, we have chords, we have double thumping, then when you got that extra pluck in there, chutch. So that's about as much detail as I'm gonna go in. So that's all the detail I'm gonna go in today about this. So practice all these techniques, really work them out. You got plenty of time, I'm sure. A lot of people are still without jobs, like myself. Please work on these techniques, refine them, come up with some other stuff, come up with some new stuff. But this is that foundation. This is what you really need to ascend. You can use these techniques to really dig in there and play any type of slap line that you want to. You could learn from all of the greats. You can play whatever you want, and you can very quickly become better than Davie504 at bass. So anyways, that's all the time we have today. So take these techniques, do what you want with them. If you like the content I have on my channel, I know this is kind of a weird video compared to my other content, but it's just something that I want to showcase, and I have a lot of bassist friends out there I know, and I love seeing other people work and learn music. It's something that I feel very comfortable with, and I just wanted to share with you guys today. But anyways, if you like my content, give me a subscribe, give me a like, and I'll see you guys again soon. Be good. I love you.